All right. Kindly, Matthew has copied this sheet here, which probably was a roadmap. We should have had the foresight. I should have had the foresight to have given you some orientation to the PowerPoint. But this will give you where we've been, and we stopped right here after 3.2. And I want to get back to 3.3, 4, and 5, but we want to deal with AI here, and then we'll jump back into the end of this, because I do think it's important. But this is, I think, a super important topic, and so I did spend some time last night piecing together what I think is a logical tackling of this topic. So let's give it some thought here this morning. You ready to do that? Let's do that. Obviously, let's start with some obvious things. Artificial intelligence clearly cannot replace your observations of the text itself, right? You have to engage your brain with God's word, and you'd better be understanding what's going on in the text, or you're not doing your job. So you need to discover what's in the text. You need to make sure you're having the wonderful experience of Psalm 119. God, show me things in your word. I want to be enlightened by what is here. I want to discover what is in your word, and you need to pray for that. You need to find these things in your word, and you need to dig into God's word and have this experience. Obviously, the understanding of the text, right? The whole point of learning to study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman doesn't need to be ashamed. You need to be able to have the light bulbs come on in your mind as you study the text. We go to school to figure out our theology, which is based on our understanding of the scope and breadth of Scripture. And as you reflect on the text within the broader scope of theology, right, you're reflecting on this text in its largest context, and that reflection is your reflection. You need to do that. AI shouldn't replace any of that, and it can't, and it shouldn't. And obviously, you know, as we talk about what AI is, it can't replace your prayerful dependence that God is helping you observe and understand and reflect on the text itself. And even as I quoted 2 Timothy 2:15, God is never going to bless if this replaces your hard work. Now, with that said, I don't mean what I even hinted at yesterday, and that is there's no value in us getting up from our desk, walking across to a bookshelf, pulling a book off, slapping it down on our desk, and turning in the pages to find an entry in Kittle or something when I can click on something on a computer screen, right? That's not what I'm talking about. Or pulling out a calculator to do your taxes versus, you know, long form on a blank piece of paper. I'm all for being efficient with my work. I'm not trying to create work for myself. I don't want us to be masochists, but I do know that to understand and to observe and to, observe, to understand and reflect, it's going to be hard work, and we need to build our muscles as exegetes and as pastors and as preachers. We've got to do the hard work and build the muscles in doing all that. And that should go without saying, but since I thought, let's just put all this down in a PowerPoint, I need to say it. So let's say it, and I've said it, and that should come as no surprise to you, right? Smile at me if you agree with that, okay? Okay. What is this? And I assume we're all past this because we live in the modern era. But when we talk about a large language tool, let's just know what we're dealing with here. This is just basically a pattern recognition engine. And I don't know, if you talk to your aging parents about this, they think it's something that it's not. Right? We're basically just using massive data sets to predict probabilities and patterns. And, you know, there's a lot of, you know, Chicken Little, sky is falling, you know, conspiratorial statements about this. And I'm not saying that it can't do a lot of damage, and it can in the long run, and it certainly can circumvent a lot of things that need to be happening. And I'm not saying that it can't be problematic, even as some of the creators of AI have warned. But, as it sits right now, AI is basically just a gigantic set of massive data sets predicting probabilities and patterns, mostly in language itself, which makes it, I think, an ideal research assistant as it currently exists. And if you let this not be useful to you now, I think you're foolish, as much as if we're a bunch of accountants being afraid of calculators. I think we need to utilize this. And as my accountant, as I used to watch him with his calculator, smoke would come from his calculator. He used his calculator like a concert pianist. So we should be using AI. That's my personal opinion, because it is a fantastic research assistant, because it does utilize massive data sets. But there are things involved in this. And I would say this, because of what it does as a large language tool, it is an excellent drafting assistant. That's probably its greatest tool. It's in drafting and language itself, and we'll talk about that as we go on. Of course, it is not, and just to say some obvious things, it's not spiritually discerning, because it's not a he or a she, right? It doesn't think. It's not doctrinally accountable. You're doctrinally accountable. You're spiritually discerning. Clearly, it's not infallible, as you'll learn if you have not used it if you haven't spent much time with it. It clearly is fallible, and I'll share some stories as we go along. And everything about it must be verified, and you can work with it as you learn to utilize prompts to get past it. And it's come so far in the last year that it's much better now than it used to be, and even in how you can work with AI to verify things, even theologically and doctrinally. Okay, tips to make it better, which I think is very important, and that is you need to pick an engine and stick with it. And I just think this is very important, because the more you stick with one engine, the more you are going to train that engine as you work with it. And again, if you're a conspiratorialist, you're never going to follow any of my advice, and you're just going to stick your head in the sand, and that's fine, because you'll be safe from whatever you fear. But if you're going to utilize this and you're not afraid of the government or whatever, you're going to pick one engine and stick with it. This will be the best way to utilize it. Your choices are, of course, the most popular one, which is ChatGPT. OpenAI is the company. Claude, which is great in terms of language. Anthropic is the company. Gemini, which is Google, which is helpful because it's integrated with all the Google stuff. And it's on 3.1 version right now. Llama, which is Meta's, the company that runs Llama. And Grok, of course, which we hear a lot about because of what's-his-face running X. So those are the engines out there. And what you want to do, and I would highly recommend this, is pay for an engine that's going to remember your work. All of these now, some are still in beta, but all of them now will remember your work. And that's the only way I think you can reliably utilize AI, is if you train it and keep it remembering all that you do. And you have to give the engine all the parameters, or it's not going to be useful, or it's like trying to retrain it every time you pull it up. And for you, that's going to be ridiculously hard. And like a lot of things that I've tried to use and adopt, I always want to use the most popular, because the most popular usually is the most advanced. It has the most money poured into it, and so I just find it's the most helpful. So I've used all of these, at least 4 out of 5 I've used heavily, but I've invested the most money into chat, and I've trained it heavily, and I've put a ton of parameters in it, and I've uploaded everything in terms of my theology, my specific doctrinal positions. I've uploaded, and I'm not afraid of it. I know you might be. I've uploaded tons of my writings, even my published works, and it knows exactly how I write. It knows exactly what I believe. I started with my, some of you I assume are ordained, and you had to write a lengthy doctrinal position paper. You had to defend it orally, as I did many years ago. That's the first thing I put in it, is my extended doctrinal statement. Here's all my nuances of theology. Here's everything I believe, and everything I'm going to deal with you, which is not a you, of course, but everything I want you to predict and all that I'm going to ask you, I want you to spit back to me things that are in keeping with my doctrine, or at least to know where I'm coming from if we're going to interact with other doctrinal positions. So you need to know who I am. Even if you use general statements about saying, which you should build a profile of who you are on a paid version of Chat or Claude or Gemini or Grok or whatever you use, and say, here's who I am, right? I'm a conservative evangelical. I believe this about the millennium or about the trib or, about inerrancy, and here's my views. And so build that with great detail, and then upload a lot of your personal views and even your writings, and say, I want to make sure that when I'm interacting with you, you know where I'm coming from. And again, the you is not you, but I'll use you as in this discussion because that's how this works. When needed, ask for very tailored and specific answers. This is what we call the prompts, right? You're going to ask all of this in very specific answers. Now, it's going to cost, right? And depends on how you use this, but for this to memorize between sessions, it's going to cost you. And some of I looked some of this up last night to see what it costs. Some is as low as $20 a month. Some can go up from there. I'm looking even at Claude can be as low as $20 a month, $19 a month for Gemini, $16 a month for Grok, depending on what you're using. Grok Pro is $30 a month. So, this is like anything that's out there now. You can't buy software as a one-time purchase. Everything is a subscription, even down to Logos these days. So it's going to be part of your budgeting, but I find that it is so helpful that it's worth budgeting this into your budget. Yep. Yeah. Right. You probably can. Yeah. What's funny is, my whole office uses, they use different, I don't tell what our office to use. We have lots of employees, but what was funny one day, I've got 2 full-time assistants, and one of my assistants, just for fun, said, what should I know working for Mike Fabarez, right? And this was months and months ago. It was pretty interesting to see a long list of things. Well, here's what you ought to know. Here's what he's like. Here's what his preferences are. And I'm not a super famous person, but it was pretty chilling how well it nailed all my proclivities and preferences and all of that. So yes, you could probably say, I want my doctrine to, match whoever, Warren Wiersbe or whatever. You could probably say that and not have to recreate the wheel. But, since it was easy for me and I started using this long ago, I just thought, I've written a lot of things. I've probably written 20 books. Here's what I've written. Here's how I write. And I pick some of the best things that I thought I've written. Here's my writing style. And I want you, anytime I ask for something to be polished, that's a word I use all the time, polish this. I want you to polish it according to what I think is my best writing style, or my vocabulary, or the way I persuade, or my rhetoric, or whatever. Do it this way. And, and I can always tell it 15 times to rework it, do it differently. But, that is one of its great strengths. But it started with, for me, theology. And sometimes it does weird things. It still does weird things, but it gets better and better and better. But you've got to spend some money. Like I do the $200 level on Chat just because I've been all in. I've slid all in on one. I have low number subscriptions on others, but my main one is Chat, and that's the one I'm thinking. I just want all the features I can get without going $1,000 a month. I'm not going to do that, but. You could, you just, it's all about the prompts, but yes, you could ask about people that you want to mirror their theology, and I'm sure it would do that. It is amazing. Okay, let's keep going. So if I'm thinking through this list, and I just played with this last night, and again, mine is conditioned. Mine knows me. So I just played with this to see how well it would do this, because I'm thinking, okay, I'm teaching you my method of how I teach my class on homiletics. So I said, okay, I want telic units on Philippians chapter 1. And I said, okay, great. And I asked for that, and it did a great job. And then I said, no, I want broader telic units, because I thought maybe I don't want to preach it with that many sermons. I want to preach it with less sermons. And it did a good job at that. And then I would say, no, I want more granular telic units. And it immediately knew my vocabulary, right? It knew what telic units were. And again, I'm already telling you in my teaching, right? If that feels like cheating, it's not, because I already tell you, go to outlines in study Bibles. Go to the headings on your editorial, right? I'm already taking you to other people's breakdowns. That's all it's doing, you understand. It's going to these other places that have broken down the telic units of Philippians chapter 1 or whatever. You could do, 2 Chronicles 16, and it's going to do the same thing. And you can then say, let's slide the slider over. Be more granular. No, be broader. Just be specific with what you want, and you can have 8 different ways to break down the telic units. And it understands what you're talking about, and it speeds the process up. And again, here, and let me say this as a general principle, and I didn't write this in the PowerPoint. You older men that are experienced pastors in the room, this is the greatest tool for you. The greatest tool for you. You younger men, it's the scary tool for you. Because for the guys in the room that have preached 2,000, 3,000 sermons, like I have, I mean, we're conditioned on looking at something and go, that's stupid, or that's great. Because we've been trained in how to do this, right? So we can look at something in our judgment and say, we know what a good sermon outline looks like, or what a good telic unit looks like. Because we've been doing this for years. The muscles and the memory of our brains and the way we do it, we can see something, at least on our own judgment, to the extent that our gift set is there. So for a 60-year-old to use AI, we're at the right time to do that. It's like an accountant that can use a tool, but he's been doing accounting with a scratch pad his whole life. He knows when the number seems right. The problem is if you're 22, just starting out, you start trusting the tool without knowing and being able to do the work long form. And that's the scary thing. So the younger you are, the more you need to trust it less, right? And the older you are, the more you will naturally not trust it, and you'll be able to discern how this all looks. And it will be natural for you. So the older you are, I think the more you lean into this, and you'll find immediately how this is a great research assistant, and that's how you should see this. So I just said, okay, let's work through some questions, and I put it this way, and I used this last night to build this, and I thought, great. And then I did this, because I think this is a great way to start when I talk about considering the context, which I didn't do anything with the context, because you should consider the context. You could ask questions about context, but I didn't get that specific. When I say read the text and the context 10 times in the ESV 1.3, well, if you're teaching from the ESV, whatever you're teaching from, but in the class I teach, I require that in my institute. But here, when I said ask for paraphrases of the text that you've read 10 times, and I said ask for simple paraphrase, ask for an expanded paraphrase, ask for an extended interpreted paraphrase, and it kicked out 3 different paraphrases of the text. Very helpful. After you've read the text 10 times, okay, maybe your text is 3 verses long or 5 verses long, and to have it build on the spot, in the voice of the text itself, a paraphrase that's 3 different lengths, super helpful. I mean, you just try it. Do it with your AI, and you'll find that you immediately start to see parts of the text that you say, I get where this is the difficult part of the text, or this is the part that I didn't understand, or this is the part, that I don't think it understands. This is a helpful practice that I put in this section in terms of trying to understand the text as we read it. And even in 7 other translations is what I think paraphrases do. But I put it this way in the next prompt. I said, when you're studying like a scholar, after reading 7 translations in your preaching portion, Ask which English translations have the greatest divergence. I pumped that in last night to see what it would pitch back. It was so helpful, and it showed me, okay, here's the CSV, and here's what the NAS said, and here's the differences here, and here's why. It built charts for me on here's the differences on why we think the committees had problems, or at least went in different directions on this particular phrase. So helpful. And instead of just reading different translations and not having any comment on why translations translated a particular phrase differently. Ask which key words are pivotal in the interpretation of your text. I did that. I got very helpful information. I'll show you some feedback here in a second. After you grapple with your lexical tools, and you should read your lexical tools, which you already have Bible software, which I hope you're all using. Clicking on those, you're reading the actual texts and the entries in your lexical tools. Now, ask specific questions regarding usage, right? Whatever that might be. And I would say, and I do this with AI already, I didn't have to deal with this last night because I do it every week, just about compare and contrast vocabulary. Right? Show me why this particular word was used here, or compare why this particular word was used, or why you think this word was used here instead of that word, which I know there's synonyms, or why this hapax legomena was used in this particular section. And I love asking about extra biblical vocabulary, particularly when it's only used a few times. I'll find words, I know that's probably way too small, but yeah, I took words like cause for offense and scandalon, right, stumbling block, and I said, tell me what the nuanced difference was in 2 Corinthians 6:3 on why Paul would use these two different words, right, and would there be any difference here, and why would there be a difference? And then I would say, tell me how the words were used in extra biblical writings. And it's not just going out there, it's giving me, like Lytle, Scott, and Jones, it's giving me examples from that, where it's showing me things in things I can verify in extra biblical classical Greek. And all of these things now, particularly in the old days, sometimes I'd have to make sure I could vet these, but now they're so well footnoted. I mean, they're so easy to find. I can just put in histories 1.83.8. I can find it on the internet and instantaneously vet that quotation. But I just want to show you, these are things, I pulled this one back from my teaching in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, because I thought, these are the kinds of things I'm doing all the time. Give me some secular Greek usages for this particular word, because I want to see how it's used. And these things sometimes are helpful and aid me in the explanation of what this particular word might have added to the weight of this sentence. And sometimes it ends up, at least, if not in my preaching, it aids my understanding of the text and helps with the force of a particular phrase or a verse. Yes? Yeah, I have. And I'm a pro subscriber for that. I'm all in on Logos. So I have all the credits, and I use about 2% every month, which shows you how much I don't find it even a fraction as helpful as my $200 a month on chat. They have their own proprietary, I don't know what they're doing. There's Faith Life, hats off to them. They're great, but their tool, here's what I like about their tool. When I use their AI tool, here's how I use it. I'll ask a question about my library's resources. And I'll say something like scandalon. I'll say, give me in my library, because I have a pretty extensive library in Logos. I say, give me in my library any helpful discussions or illustrations on, that are predicated on the word scandalon. And it will bring up a list of things in books. So I will use it for that. And it'll do that work for me. But it isn't it's not a tenth of what chat will do for me. Chat's just so much better in every way. But it does do a good job drilling into my resources in Logos. Yeah. Okay. And chat has tried to ratchet back on that, but here's what you could always do with chat. Say, be critical of me on this. Tell it what to do. Because, yeah, chat for a while was way too, oh, that's a wonderful way to word this, and I hated that. So you could tell it, stop kissing up to me and tell me how this could be way better. Set the parameters. And you need to make everything you tell it needs to be longer than just a sentence. And that's why I always turn on my dictation and I talk to it. Because it's better than typing. I say always, that's an overstatement. I type a lot to it. But I would much rather blather on verbally and have it transcribe it into the text window. Because I want a lot of data in it. And I do want to say things like, hey, be critical of this. Even play the devil's advocate on how I outlined this text. And show me why you might think this is the wrong way to go about it. Because I agree, chat has been very positive, but they have fixed that where it's not quite as positive. In the last 6 months, it's less positive. But it's very kind. Yeah, too kind. Yes. No. But I rarely will take a text of any size. That's not true. Occasionally I will, but especially for a sermon, I'm not taking the verbiage of it. Most of it is research. So I'm not taking large chunks of text and putting it in there. And here's the thing I should tell you too. I preach from Logos. I don't use the sermon module that in Logos. I use the notes module, which I know is not what they want you to do. But I've been preaching from the notes module for 6 years now. How was my experience? I like it. My window, what I preach from is 2/3 of my window is my notes, and 1/3 of my window is the text. So my notes can be much more truncated, where I can mouse over a reference and it can pop up, or I can click on the reference and it gives me the text. And so I have a lot of hot links that'll take me back to the preaching text, currently in 2 Corinthians, so I can hit it and always get back to it. But it's like having an open Bible in your notes, and that's how I preach now. It started in COVID. I used to preach from an iPad, but then I found that during COVID, when I did a ton of, I was doing 2 videos a day. I thought, what am I doing? I'm just going to do this from Logos. And then it just, when I came back to the pulpit after a few months, I just stuck with Logos. But I like it now, and even when I travel, I've been to places. I was preaching at Southern Seminary, and Dr. Moeller at lunch afterwards said, we've never had anybody preach from a laptop in the chapel pulpit before. I said, well, you can exercise the pulpit after I'm done. I said, well, it'll survive. It'll be okay. Anyway, I found that hard to believe. But, yeah. So, no, I've never had any issues with crashing. I've heard rumors about, different things, but I've not experienced that myself. Okay, let's keep going. These are just ideas, and maybe enough of these ideas will help you. But if you're thinking through, If you've summarized your text, remember I've said here under number 1.7, you're supposed to summarize your text. And I do this every week. Once I summarize the text, I say, polish this draft. I use that verb all the time, polish it, which is one of its great strengths, right? Polish this summary, I'll say. And then I'll say, how well does this summary summarize this original meaning, right? Did I hit it well? And sometimes you do, and not so much anymore, but sometimes you'll have to say, be critical of this, right? Be critical of how well this summarizes the original meaning. What am I missing? That's a better question, right? What am I missing in the historical setting of this text, right? How can I make this statement more concise, especially when it comes to summary drafts of this? I always want to say, because sometimes it tends to recommend things longer and longer, and I don't want it long. I want the summary statement to be tight. So when I leave section 1.7, and I do this without referring to the list, but I'm teaching people the list, I'm just doing it intuitively, but I'm always doing the summary of the text. I want it to be very concise. One of the greatest strengths, I used to use all the tools in Logos for cross-references. I don't use them anymore. I use AI. Ask cross-references on any and all aspects of your text. And I mean any and all aspects of your text. When it comes time, and I say this in Study Like a Scholar, look up cross-references in 1.8. This is where it shines like crazy. And then you can ask for them to be categorized. Categorize all the cross-references that, deal with whatever aspect of the text. Scandalon. Tell me anything in the text that cross-references the idea of anything that the Apostle Paul thought was a stumbling block. Tell me about anytime Jesus spoke of anything that might have been a stumbling block. Tell me anything that is referenced as a stumbling block but doesn't use the word stumbling block. Just ask it those questions. And just give me references. And then I take those references, and it lists the references, and I take those and put them into the notes in Logos, and then I can mouse over them all and just see them. Or sometimes it'll just list them in the ESV, and I can just read them. But it is so good at this. It is so good at this. It's better than New Treasury Scripture Knowledge. It's better than all those cross-reference tools I gave you on the screen. It is really, really good at this. And ask for things like this. Give me narrative examples of this. Give me a narrative example of something that cross-references this idea. And if you're always trying to use Scripture to explain Scripture, ChatGPT or any AI is going to shine in this. Ask for character studies that highlight your text principles, right? Here's a text you're preaching in Colossians. Give me something, right, that's going to illustrate this, some kind of character in the Old Testament that's going to illustrate this concept. And you think you know the Bible well, right? You've been teaching the Bible for years. It's going to suggest something. Oh, I forgot to think about that. It does this all the time. And then you're going to come back to this later in your study when you get to preparing like a preacher. Revisit this later in your study when you go to filling in your outline. This happens early in your study, and it's going to happen later in your study that you're going to be asking for more cross-references in terms of narratives and characters and just thematic cross-references. And it does it so well, so well. All right. Ask for respected conservative evangelical commentaries. When I say look up commentaries, sometimes, and we know series, but sometimes there's a commentary out there that you've missed, that no one's recommended to you. It's not a part of a series, and it's good. I can think of some. I remember a great one in Acts that was from the Restoration Movement, and no, I didn't agree with its baptismal regeneration. It was a great commentary. It's really good. And it'll recommend commentaries that maybe you forgot about or didn't hear of, so just ask it for commentaries. And ask it about common points, of disagreement. Well, how am I going to disagree with this commentary? I'm a conservative evangelical. Tell them what your eschatology is. Tell them what your view of, baptism is or whatever, and then ask it. And that will sometimes turn the light bulbs on, because sometimes you look at a commentary, you think, oh, we're in agreement, and maybe you've been looking at that commentary for 5 years, and you never even realized you don't agree on certain things. And it's going to make that super clear. Which, by the way, this is not about sermon prep, but one of the things I do with my chat all the time. I sit in meetings all the time, and someone will bring up a book I haven't read, and especially when I sit on boards, I will take that book title, and I'll say, sometimes I'll say, just give me a 3-sentence summary of the book, but oftentimes I'll say, give me a bullet-pointed summary of each chapter of this book. And it'll go, and I'll get the whole book, and if the meeting's a slow-going meeting, it may be 2 pages, but I can read the entire summary of the book before the conversation's even over. And that's amazing. Right? You used to pay back in the old days. I had notebooks full of the subscription that I had when people would send me summaries of books. Do you remember that, old timers? I used to pay for that. Now I do pay for it, $200 a month, but I have that for any book I could possibly want. Yeah. Say it again? No. Who does that? It's an internet service? Working preacher, anybody heard that? I haven't heard of it. Yeah, no. No, I don't know that one. Yeah, ask about commentaries. Ask about important clarifications most commentators make. I tried that last night because I was trying to think how to help you on this, and that was really helpful. I said, I picked a passage, I said, whatever, Philippians 4:4. I said, in Philippians 4, I may have said 4 through 6, I said, give me places where most commentators have to make clarifications on this section of Scripture. And it said, boom, 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 boom. These sections, all the commentators usually have to make clarifications on that. It was great, super great. I mean, it was like the exegetical summaries, only much more manageable in terms of looking at, even before I jump into reading the commentaries, these are the hot spots in the passage that I know most people are going to have to lean into when they read these commentaries. All right, after reading your available commentaries, ask specific questions about specific commentaries. And I do that all the time. I'll read a commentary and I'll think, especially if it's a long one, if it's, Baker exegetical or something, it's like I've read 3 pages on one verse and I'm like, I'm not even sure exactly what he's trying to say about this. Especially if it's Craig Keener or something, like, I don't even know what he's trying to say. Right? Craig Keener? I'm not sure Craig knows what he's trying to say. But no, that's not true. That's not fair. He's a nice guy. But I'll say, summarize what he's trying to say. And it's super helpful. Sometimes these confusing commentators, I just want to say, clarify. But ask specific questions about specific commentaries. And is he really saying this? And does he agree with, whatever, Douglas Moo over here? Or, is what he's saying different than what F.F. Bruce said on this? Just ask very specific questions about the specific commentaries. Compare and contrast commentators' view, which I guess I just said in the sentence I laid out. Does this commentator agree with this commentator? Or how do these commentators disagree with each other? Ask to clarify difficult sections of commentaries, which I just said about Keener. Ask for historical or geographical settings of text, which gets into the whole, I guess it goes back to 1.5, biblical events, peoples, places, and things. But that, I think, is super helpful. Some of the socio-rhetorical, cultural issues in a text. But anyway, I'm just throwing out a lot of things I played with last night that I think will help you. Some of these might be prompts that will help you as you use AI.
What you're talking about, is it available for the $20 a month?
Yeah. Yeah, you could do it right now, probably on the free version, and have answers popping up on your phone, and you'll be impressed with it right now. I'm just saying what happens with the paid versions is the memory of what you do between sessions. That's the main thing. And then there's limits, right? One of the things you do with the free version is you can only do so much data back and forth with the servers, because that's what I'm paying for. I'm paying for space on their servers, and I'm paying for access to their servers. So that's why money's involved, and I understand it, and it's worth paying for, because they're building the server farms and I want to use some of that. It's fair. Okay, but think about it. If we're in Logos, right, I don't own those commentaries. I have a license for those commentaries. So I made that decision in my mind. I used to have 7,000 books in my library. I made a decision at one point. I'm going to start donating books to college libraries, and they want to build their libraries. I'm going to invest and be all in on Logos. And I thought to myself, I have 2 sons. They're both pastors. They don't want my books. And then I'm going to die with my Logos library and have 12,000 books. What is that? I'm going to pass my password on to somebody? I don't own those books. I'm already at a place where I don't own books. So in a sense, yes, AI gives me access to books that I don't own. I can every time I'm in a meeting and someone says something about a book, and I look it up and I can read what's in those books. I can even say, give me the top 12 quotes from this book on, I don't know, a book on how boards work, right? Nonprofit boards. And I can read those quotes. I didn't have the book, but I'm accessing the book and I'm paying. But you don't buy things in Logos. You buy a license.
Right, I buy that license, but my ignorance is now, I'm saying, am I, like, if I had never bought MacArthur Study Lab,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going for the first time, and I'm coming and I've got Logos, and I've got chat, and I can say to myself, I don't have to go to Logos anymore because I can go to chat, because it's going to give me everything.
Well, I'm not going to go there yet because I can't say. I mean, I could say, but I want to be able to pull up my phone on a plane because I've downloaded a book on Logos and be able to read the entire page after page after page. I'm not going to do that on chat. Chat for me is to, dive bomb into a book and pull out something I want to get. It has it all, but it's got everything. I mean, there's sometimes occasionally it'll say something about, I don't have it. And there's a big lawsuit right now, and they send me stuff because I'm a published author, and it'll say, these guys got your book, and they didn't pay for it, and they have advantages to it, whatever. I'm not going to be a part of any of these class action lawsuits. I don't even care. I upload my stuff now so it can learn my writing style. I don't care. I don't care. And I know that right now I take advantage of knowing what's in these books because they're out there. I don't know. I don't know the legalities of it all. I don't know how it all works. I just know I can pretty much find out what's in any chapter of any book. At least it's going to summarize it for me, and that's all I want. I don't want to read the details of the books online. That's not what I use chat for. I use chat for finding out what's in a book, not let me read 10 consecutive pages in a book. But sometimes I'm saying, give me a good commentary on James that I'm in, and it'll say, here is it written by, Jim Smith. And I thought, I didn't even know that. I go to Logos, I buy the commentary. So it's a research assistant to me. And I remember once back in the day, I tried to hire a research assistant. And I thought, well, that'll be cool. And it didn't work. I tried, and I didn't have enough for him to do. And I couldn't use him well, and I was too young or whatever. It didn't work. Now I feel like I really have a research assistant because he's always there, ready to go. He's not a he, it's an it, but I can really ask him anything at any time. And to me, I am doing the work, But even if I didn't do the work, which I do the work, but I could say something like summarize all the commentaries on James chapter 2, verses 1 through 14, and let me see all the exegetical problems in the passage and the 5 things that most people misunderstand about the text. Let me read it all on the plane, and I'll teach when I get home, tonight. I could read all that, having taught on that 5 times in my ministry or whatever, and I could probably get through that okay, because I'm reading all the stuff I've already done. It would refresh my memory on it all. It would be a shortcut. I would never advise anyone new in ministry to do that. And in that sense, have I done all that work right now? No, but it's doing a lot of work for me that a research assistant could do. That's the thing I would never recommend someone to do, but someone with 42 years of experience probably could get away with, right? And a lot of people do that with their own brains. I've had people in my church, they don't even hardly prepare to preach in my pulpit because they're just drawing out of their amazing brains to do that. I can't do that. My brain doesn't work like that. I need to go back and refresh my memory on something before I can preach on it. So, yeah, I do want to do the work. I have to do the work. I can't just get up and pontificate without doing the work. But it is a great tool, and there's a lot of things that I've studied in my mind that I can quickly go to chat, and it can quickly refresh my memory on all this. Think about the patristic fathers. All of us have studied, if we've been to seminary, the patristic fathers. Okay? How many of us can piece all those things together? Even the councils, Constantinople. Hard for us to quickly remember all the things that were dealt with. But if we said real quick, give me the 5 things dealt with at the Council of Constantinople, we'd be like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. That's super helpful. A research assistant could hand us a cheat sheet on that. But I wouldn't want to do that for someone that never studied it, right? That's the difference between someone who's seasoned using ChatGPT and someone who isn't. So that's the nuance on teaching a group like this of seasoned pastors and newbies. That's a hard thing. So I'm always trying to say, let's do the work, and then let's try and use this to help us along the way. And I do think it can help us. It can always help us. And I want it to help us in a big way by saying, summarize our work. Flesh out a better way to do this. And I've got more things to say about how to do that. Like, after working on the 2 key questions, right, you've worked on them, submit them this and say, how well does this capture what the text is talking about? You've already taken a stab at it. How well does that do that? Does that do a good job at it? Let it answer the question. And if it says, no, you've missed the point, or it could be better if you did it this way, and what ChatGPT is probably going to say is, well, that's a pretty good effort, but it could be better if, okay. And you may say, yeah, I think you're right. Or you may say, no, I don't think so. And the seasoned person is going to probably get to a place where they're going to be better at saying, I don't think you're right, or I think you are right. And it's going to be based on experience. How can I make this more accurate? Ask it that. Or how well does this capture what the text is saying about what it's talking about? There's the second half. How can I make this more accurate? Ask it that question. Right? Or after drafting the textual point, the whole textual point, saying, how does this capture the gist of the then and there of this text? Ask it that question. I played with these last night, and I think this was good. Right? How could I make this more concise? How could I make this more thorough and complete? I want to keep balancing those 2 things, and I do that with chat all the time. Make this more concise, make this more thorough. It makes it longer, makes it shorter, and it helps refine it, or it helps me to refine it. So I'm already starting with the draft. I always start with the draft. I don't say draft something for me. I draft something. If you are drafting things and you're asking it questions like this, right? Does this capture the gist of the then and there? Right? This is what a research assistant would do. Hey, you're missing the point. You never even mentioned the fact that that he was in bonds. Oh yeah, you're right. He was in prison. I should have mentioned that. Put that in, right? I don't think someone is needing to be credited for writing that. You're writing this. right? Any more than you had to say, yeah, Dunn had to remind me of that in the commentary. This is a research assistant. Correct, but what you don't want to do is write me a sermon, write me some points, write me a textual point. That's why I'm putting so much detail into this. All of these points, I want it to be a research assistant to help you clean this up, to help you sharpen it, to help you say it better. Because at the end of the day, this is going to be your sermon. It's going to help you with this. The way they're going to be nailed for plagiarism, right, and needing to put an asterisk behind their sermon is when the AI is writing their sermon. And you know what? I think any of us can tell when a preacher doesn't own his sermon. It's terrible. It's terrible. Number one, their head is reading off a manuscript. I haven't even got to delivery yet in this seminar, but if anyone's reading off their manuscript, you should not be a preacher. Get your head off the manuscript, get your chin up, talk to the people. That's what you do as a preacher, right? If you don't know the material enough to get your chin up and talk to the people, you shouldn't be preaching, right? You cannot read off a manuscript. Because if you do read off a manuscript, I'm thinking, why don't you just pass it out to everybody? And I don't even know if you did create that if you're reading off a manuscript, right? Put your chin up and talk to the people. You're preaching to them. So I am concerned about people that are having someone else write their stuff. I've fired people for plagiarism. Plagiarism is bad. I don't want anybody plagiarizing. This is not what I'm advocating for. I don't think anybody should mistake what I'm trying to say here in this. Yes? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it can't help you, right, unless you're doing the work. You got to do the work, right? And that's why I'm trying to say everything I put up on the screen today about AI is following the pattern of helping you as you do these steps. I mean, look at how I've worded this. After working on the 2 key question, after drafting the textual point, you're doing these things, and then you're saying, how can I make this better? Which is like having a professor or another person next to you saying, hey, how can I make this better? I just came from preaching in a church in Phoenix where 5 guys get together every week and they collaborate to preach their message. They preach the same text and the same outline. Do they get up and say, hey, this isn't my sermon? No, they all collaborated together to help each other. Right? So they had an assistant. They had 4 assistants. I don't think they need to say that. Right? They collaborated on it. But they're preaching a message and they're owning the message. Right? Any more than you have to say, I had 5 commentaries that helped me put this message together. But yes, you need to know how to read the text, right? To observe the text, to interpret the text, right? To exegete what's in the text, to reflect on it theologically, to be able to principalize the text, right? To draft what it is that you're going to say about the text, and to learn to preach it. Yeah, all of that, absolutely. Block outlining. After your attempts to block outlining, again, you see my verbiage here. You've done it. Now you put it in ChatGPT, you copy it, you throw it in there, you say, what am I missing in my syntactical outline of the text? Am I missing anything here? Ask it that. Are there better ways to logically break this down? Sometimes you'll say, yes, there is, or sometimes it'll say, hey, this is done well. Am I missing anything in the original language syntax? That's a good question, particularly if you don't know the language. I would even say, and if I had more time, as I teach in my class, I would have you go to the syntactical tools in Logos that will say, here's the syntactical layout in the original language by someone who knows how to syntactically outline in the original languages, and at least you can see how sometimes the syntactical layout in the original languages can help you understand how perhaps you should block outline the receptor language that we're in. And sometimes you can have someone simply explain this, something called AI, simply explain that to us on a screen in ChatGPT or Claude or Grok or whatever you're using. All right, after giving titles to the major component parts, which we're supposed to do in 1.12, ask, are these titles free from analogies or metaphors? I would love everyone to ask that of ChatGPT, because every time someone turns something into me, when I'm teaching homiletics, I see it all the time. I take my red pen out, I say, analogy, metaphor, and all you'd have to do is ask Chat, and it could do it for you. Do these titles accurately represent the component parts? Is that a good summary of it? Give me some wording options to distill the indicative labels more concisely. If you just said that to Chat, it would give you some options, and maybe you'd say, that's better than this. I don't think that's plagiarism. I think that's a research assistant helping you distill what you're trying to say, and this is just building the component indicative parts. We're not even to outlining yet. Thinking through your congregation. Well, how is this going to help me do that? Now I'm in point 2, planning like a pastor. Well, submit several paragraphs describing your congregation. I would turn on my dictation and I would say, I want to talk about my congregation, and I would describe my congregation. Then I would dictate profiles of various types of congregants, just like I said you would do with the sticky notes. Discuss the region, culture, news events affecting them, and then submit your evaluations. And I would say, consider these connections, right, and consider these connections and suggest others is what I wanted to say. And I would say, do this for each of the categories of hearers. In other words, I'm saying, look at the text that I've just studied, and it's going to remember all the things in the previous list that you've gone through, and say, I want to see about how these people and this text go together. In other words, I think, right, ask this, I think the region, culture, etc. might affect their reception of this text, right, like this, and suggest other possibilities. How will these things connect with these people? I'm asking, like, what might I need to keep in mind in preaching this particular text to my congregation? I mean, how can that be plagiarism? What is that? That's saying, help me think through the preaching of this particular text to these people. You will be surprised what this comes up with. This will be insightful. This will be helpful. Sometimes it'll be lame, and sometimes you'll roll your eyes and you'll move right on. Every now and then, it'll be something helpful. And again, I've heard all the old timers talk about, can it help you pray and all that? I would ask it things like this. What are some things I can be praying about as I consider preaching this passage for my congregation? If that sounds to you blasphemous, it's not blasphemous. Try it. Ask it that. Say, build a prayer list for me that corresponds to the important aspects of my study so far. I dare you to ask that. And if it prompts you to pray, it's a good thing. Are there any prayers from any conservative evangelical books or articles tied to the themes that surfaced in my study of this text? I assume that's less blasphemous to you, right? Because it's running to books and articles and magazines, periodicals, journals, and it may pull some things in for you that'll be fantastic. And you can pray through those. Ask, what are 4 or 5 important things I should be praying for as I prepare to preach this sermon? Give me 3 great quotes from E.N. Bounds on preachers and prayer. That would be good. I said you should be reading that. You don't even have to buy the book. You can just ask it. Just like you said. In this case, I don't need E.N. Bounds. I can just ask it to give me some great quotes this week. And next week, if you ask it again, say, you gave me those last week. Give me new quotes. And you can get new quotes from E.N. Bounds that can get you on your knees praying for your sermon. After drafting a solid preaching point, right? Say, polish this preaching point. I use that verb all the time, polish this. See if you can smooth this out. And again, I always want it in keeping with the way that I write, and I've uploaded a lot of things that I've written, so it knows how I write. How well does this preaching point stay within the text's general meaning? Ask it some evaluative questions. How can I improve this preaching point? Is there a way to improve the urgency of this preaching point? Those are just good questions to ask. See what it says. Maybe it's junk. Maybe it's helpful. Maybe it'll prompt something better. This is, like you said, just having another person in the room. It's not a person, it's an it. Right? It's just a predictive data set, possibility model of words that should go after other words, but it's going to help you bounce ideas off of this set of words, right? That's going to help you do this better. After you've worded your outline, ask, is there any analogy, metaphor, or anything ambiguous in the wording of these points? This is how far we got yesterday. Can these points be more direct and to the point? Are there any better synonyms to be used in any of these? By the way, I ask that all the time. I'll say, I don't even usually ask it this way, but I'll say, okay, I use the word pursue in this point. Give me 7 different words for pursue. And I don't even tell it how I want it to be. Just give me 7 different words for pursue, and it'll give me 7. Sometimes I'll say, give me 17, and it'll give me 17. It's just so good to get your mind thinking by asking for synonyms. It's better than, there's a website called Word Hippo. Anybody use that? Use that one? Anyway, this makes it look like nothing because it's so much better. Yeah. Well, that'd be great. We could, but we don't. I mean, that would be great, but if you got time and you've got access and you got someone that's going to sit there with you, like you said, if you can collaborate with another guy, ask all these questions, and he's as smart as this guy, this thing, yeah, it's just, to me, it's not feasible. Yeah, I'm all for going to lunch with a fellow pastor on your staff and having these conversations. Do it. I don't think it's going to make me a hermit. I mean, my job is people, and so is yours, right? That's my job. I counsel people. I work with people. I preach to people. I talk to people. Responding to people, on the phone with people, emailing people, texting people. I mean, my job is people. I don't think pastors are not going to have human contact. But to me, it's a great tool, and it's without all the drama. Yeah, I mean, it's just so much faster and efficient. But yeah, temptation for me not to be with people. We all need people. We're all going to be around people. I don't know. For me, it's not. I'm not afraid of that. Is there any more powerful or persuasive wording that I can use? Ask it specific questions like that. Give me a better word for. Give me a clearer phrase than. Give me 3 optional wordings for this point. I do this every week. Just help me with this. Give me some better words. Give me a different phrase. Give me some optional words. And I'm always picking the points. I've been picking points for 40 plus years. I know what a good point sounds like in my mind. And I reject a million things it tells me, but I land on something that I think is good. It's not picking for me. That's the thing. I'm picking. You pick. You choose. You build the sermon. It's just there as an assistant. That's all it's doing. All right. Now the sermon content, that is where we left off last time, and that's what I want to go back to the outline. So we'll do that. It's time for our break. Not quite. Let's do any questions, and then we'll take our break. A few minutes for questions here. Yes. Nothing from my laptop. I mean, what the church sees, the tech booth will throw up just my main points. Yeah. So if it's a 3-point sermon, they'll see 3 points, or 4 points, they'll see 4 points. They'll come up as I preach them. I put out a worksheet every week. Usually the first word of the point is on the worksheet. On the back of the worksheet, every week I give 5 discussion questions, which fuels all the small groups. We call them home fellowship groups. They meet. We got about 100 of them. They meet and they discuss those questions. I don't allow for groups that are doing books or whatever. We do discussion of the sermon. At the bottom, we have 13 books that are suggested reading, that are somehow related to the themes that brought up in the sermon. There's a reading list of the scriptures, which we have reading through the Bible in a year. And there's 7 suggested sermons from our sermon catalog that are somehow related. So we have sermons, books, reading schedule, 5 questions, and then on the front side, a big blank page, just 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper with 3 points or 4 points or however many points in the sermon. They write them down. I encourage that. We also have it digitally downloaded. They can digitally download. A lot of people, I encourage laptops. Bring your laptops. Bring your digital devices. I'm not antiquarian. I'm not a Luddite. I want people to bring their devices. Yes. That's all I was trying to say, yeah.
So like this is all built into that first point of studying like a scholar, right? So at what point does like if I need to do all this work beforehand, and then I could incorporate AI in the back and forth and integration. Like at what point is it becoming like have I reached the investment point where you need to try to refine and get more sharp? Am I losing actual efficiency over the course of my time? Like because, I'll come up with something and this will be a workable outline for me to preach. Do I need to spend another, 30 minutes or another hour or 2 hours and everything go back and forth from these same things to have a slightly sharper outline for presentation or sermon? Or should that be scrapped and then get into the other aspects of pastoral ministry?
Yeah, I use the 30 hours in part for the math. It's easy. But secondly, for the new people, because realistically, seasoned pastors aren't going to spend 30 hours on a sermon, but newbies should probably think they're going to spend 30 hours on a sermon because they should spend a lot more time. The longer you preach, the more efficient you become, and you should be spending less time on it. And especially if you're a seasoned pastor, you got a lot of responsibilities. You can't spend 30 hours on a sermon. It'd be nice if we could, but we can't. So, I spend 2 full days, and unless there's a funeral or some big thing that comes up, those 2 full days are 14, 20 hours maybe. And, I've been preaching a lot of sermons, so I should be able to do a good sermon in 14 to 20 hours. And, be efficient as you can, but I'm just trying to say, in breaking them down, I do want to give as equal parts as I can to studying, to planning, and to preparing. And the part I'm always trying to push is we're not planning enough as pastors, and that's why I wrote the book, because we need to be thinking about our people and how we're going to get this sermon to land in their lives. But yeah, if we have time, here's the thing about study. Here's my fear, is we can always fill our time with study. And people that come out of seminaries with a high view of Scripture, that's what they're always doing. They got 20 hours to prepare a sermon. They spend 19 hours studying because that never seems like we're done studying. And that's a mistake, because you come out of it and then you spend, 1 hour preparing how to say it. And all you're doing is giving us a regurgitation of a commentary, your commentary.
So in that process, when you're drafting your statements and those things, part of the categories of overlap you have, because you're still refining the study by some of this interaction with AI, but that's also preparing like a preacher, and how am I going to communicate what I expect? Like, does that question make sense?
No.
Based on your look, it doesn't.
No, it didn't make sense. All the things I'm saying should be taking place, like everything I just talked about, are taking place in the categories. So, there's a lot of steps in the study part, but that should only be taking up, theoretically, a third of my time. And then I want that second part to feel a little more leisurely, because I'm praying a lot, thinking of my congregation, thinking of specifics as how this is going to be applied. I do want that to slow down in my heart, so that I'm thinking very carefully about, as a pastor, how I'm going to help these people with this text. The first part's going to feel like seminary. The third part's going to be like, oh man, let's figure out how to say this. Illustrations, proving, explaining, applying, and I'm going to work on how to rhetorically get this out. But AI is going to be involved mostly in the first and the last, but a little bit in the middle, as I tried to say, by asking it to help me with some prayer lists and stuff like that.
So the part of that is the third my mistake. Like, how can I say this sharply?
Yeah. Which I haven't gotten to. I haven't gotten much to yet, other than wording the points. Yeah, and we're going to get to that because I'll finish that. I know we kind of took it out of order, but I'll get back to 3.3, 3.4, 3.5, and then we'll go back to some things I said about AI, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5. You can, but I tell, especially the gals, I teach teaching the Bible for women class, and women in particular, for some reason, they're always thinking about how to say it when they're studying it, and they're always working on illustration at the first point. I train them really hard. Just stop it. I don't want you thinking about illustrations when you're studying, right? Just really discipline yourself not to. And then as pastors, I don't know. I don't want to be quite so hard on pastors with that, but I find women immediately start studying and thinking of how to illustrate it, how to say it, and they need to discipline themselves to just leave all of that to the end. But you're right. Sometimes, seasoned pastors are going to say, this is a great way to illustrate that. Wait, write it down and leave it, get back to that at the end.